Welcome back to AP World History. We're now going to look at our last part of this, rounding out the 15th century, with our look at the Americas, and more specifically the Aztecs and the Incas. So the Aztecs are based out of central Mexico, and they'll conquer parts of Mexico and parts of Mesoamerica. Um, and they're based out of a city known as Tenochtitlan, which is built on Lake Texcoco, and it is actually built on a lake. As you can see, it's kind of built on some of the islands there, and they filled in other areas to build their buildings on. And it's got a lot of canals in it, which makes it kind of like a city of the city of Venice in Europe. And this will be the eventual city of Mexico City when the Spaniards come in and take it over. The Aztecs were really originally a nomadic people, but then decided to convert to agriculture when they started to conquer other areas of Mesoamerica and set up their empire. And so they conquer these other areas and they ask for tribute in return, so they get goods like um, manufactured goods like weapons and stuff like that. They get food stuffs. They get textiles for clothing and everything else that you might need, and that's their taxes that they get. Um, and so they have loose control over these areas, but they do have the strongest military, so they can force people to their will. And they'll focus on trade a lot to bring these areas in, and we'll have a new class come about called the Pochteca, which will be a merchant class, and they will have large markets built in most of the major cities for these people to take advantage of, and for people to come in and trade and get products throughout the whole region. Unfortunately for them, there isn't like a Silk Road type deal connecting them with the Incas or anything like that, and so it's mostly just a regional trade. Then religion-wise, they have a lot of focus on human sacrifice, and so they need people to sacrifice, which is part of the reason why they go to war so often. And they take the people they capture in war, which is more what the war is about than actually going and killing. It's about capturing people, and they will capture them and um, bring them in as a POW and then sacrifice them to their gods, because their gods need the blood for nourishment. And if they don't nourish the gods, then then everything's going to fall apart. And so you have some crazy human sacrifices that go on. Things like I probably shouldn't go into them too much here, but you have hearts being taken out. You have people just being killed. You have infants being used as sacrifice. So many different ways that they sacrifice people to the gods in order to fulfill what the gods need. And one of the major gods is a god named Quetzalcoatl, who his return to Earth is going to be a big deal, because the myth going around that will lead to a guy named Hernan Cortez coming in and being claimed as Quetzalcoatl, and you're not going to fight your god or look at your god as an enemy, and so that allows Hernan Cortez to kind of take the Indians by surprise, rally some of the conquered peoples onto his side, and take out um, the Aztecs in 1521. Now, further south in the Americas, you've got the Inca Empire, and they'll last from 1438 to 1533, and they will conquer the region of the Andes, going all the way up to regions like Colombia, and going all the way down to modern countries like Chile. And they set up a very efficient and bureaucratic government that's linked through roads, just as we see the Romans do. And they have the Sapa Inca at the top, who's the leader, and then you have it broken down into 80 other provinces that have governors over them, and then they have local governments that are run as well. And the unique thing here is that the government owns everything. They control all the property, all the goods, and they store these in storehouses. So clothes, potatoes, which is their main crop, are stored in these storehouses and then are given to people based on what they need. So we kind of look at it today as it's a early form of communism before communism was even around. It's very much a command economy where the government determines what you need and when you need it. Um, Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it communistic, or I don't want to say or think that it is communistic. It's different. It's its own thing, but it's similar. It's the most similar thing that you can relate it to is probably that, um, to give yourself a picture in your head. Now, to do this, they had to group people um, in specific groupings, and they go 10, 50, 100, 500, 1,000, 5,000, and 10,000 to organize everything so they know what storehouses or where storehouses need to be and how much to have and which ones. Um, and so the government does all of that. The government is also helped run by men and women. It's not just a male-dominated um, bureaucracy. And this kingdom will eventually fall when Francisco Pizarro comes in and unites Indians against the Incas. And we're going to see why they would be discontent here. We saw why the people, or why the Indians would be against the Aztecs because of the human sacrifice and all the conquest. Here again, people were conquered; they didn't join necessarily willingly. But the big difference here is all conquered people are forced to learn Quechua, which is the language of the Incans, and learn Incan culture. And if they do that, everything's all good. If they don't do everything like that, and if they don't do those things, then there are some problems. Um, and action is taken against those groups to get them in line. But some other unique things with the culture here is, again, we have the use of quipus, which we saw earlier in the Andes. They continue this practice of the knotted strings and some meaning for it. Again, we can't interpret them because we don't know how to interpret the knots on the strings and what all that means. Um, they also have some of the best architects and engineers in the Americas. As you can see with the buildings over here, the buildings have been destroyed primarily by the Spaniards when they came in. But you can see they move these large stones onto other stones, and you can take a credit card, you can take a knife, and you cannot cut through it. There is no gap there. They didn't use any mortar or anything like that. And so it's an awesome thing to go see these huge structures. If you ever have a chance to go to Peru or Chile or anywhere where the Incans were and see their ruins, it is an awesome thing. And they were only able to do this because of their forced labor system, which was part of that economy that they had, and that people had to follow the mita, or their mita requirements, and then in return for doing the state work, whether it was farming or building or whatever it may be, they then got what they needed to survive, the food, the clothing, whatever, from the government. And so by the time the Europeans come, you've got a strong empire here, you've got a strong empire in Mexico with the Aztecs, and very vibrant cultures, but we're going to see all of this change in after 1492 when Europeans start coming to the Americas, exploring, and start to set up their own little civilizations here and knocking the Indian empires from, or their native empires from control.